Congratulations! By starting this training, you're stepping into a role that goes far beyond everyday driving. You are becoming a professional driver, someone trusted to safely carry not just a vehicle, but people. Families, friends, visitors, and communities will rely on your skill, awareness, and professionalism. This is what sets you apart. Behind the wheel of a bus, you're responsible for the lives of your passengers, but also for making the road safer for everyone around you. Every turn, every stop, every decision you make helps protect not only those in your care, but every driver, cyclist, and pedestrian who shares the road with you. Through this training, you'll build the skills, confidence, and habits that define the very best drivers. You'll learn how to handle your bus with ease, keep your passengers comfortable and safe, and set the standard of professionalism that raises the bar for all drivers. This isn't just about earning a license. It's about a craft you can be proud of. So bring your focus, your commitment, and your energy. Let's get started. Your journey as a professional bus driver begins here. Every professional driver develops one habit that separates them from everyone else. They create space. We call it the cushion of safety. Your job isn't to react to problems. Your job is to avoid ever having them. That starts by remembering one simple rule. Drive for the road, the vehicle, and the people, not the schedule. You'll sometimes feel pressure to make up time. Maybe a winery ran long. Maybe traffic is heavier than expected. But speeding is never the answer. Even over a 500-mile trip, speeding usually saves only about 12 minutes. Our tours aren't anywhere near that long. What you risk instead is a ticket, your license, our guests' confidence, or worse, someone getting hurt. It's simply not worth it. The next habit is following distance. A fully loaded tour bus doesn't stop like a car. At highway speeds, it can take nearly the length of a football field to come to a complete stop. That's why we follow the 1 second for every 10 feet of vehicle length, plus 1 extra second rule. For one of our buses, that's roughly 3 seconds in good conditions, and even more in rain, darkness, or heavy traffic. Space gives you time, and time gives you options. Professional drivers don't just watch the car in front of them. They're looking much farther ahead. Try to keep your eyes at least 5 vehicles ahead. If brake lights start appearing in the distance, you'll know long before the driver directly in front of you reacts. That means smoother braking, happier guests, and fewer surprises. While you're looking ahead, keep scanning everything around you. Check your mirrors every 5 to 10 seconds. Watch for vehicles entering traffic. Watch parked cars with people inside. Watch cyclists. Watch pedestrians. The more information you gather, the fewer surprises you'll have. One of the biggest mistakes inexperienced drivers make is focusing only on what's directly in front of them. Professional drivers are constantly building a picture of everything happening around the vehicle. Another part of that picture is staying predictable. Always use your turn signal. Think of it as a conversation with everyone else on the road. You're telling them what you're about to do before you do it. Signal early. Wait until it's actually safe. Then move over smoothly. Sometimes another driver won't let you merge. You'll put your signal on, and they'll speed up. Let them. You're driving the larger vehicle. You could force the issue. But if there's a collision, everyone loses. At Toast Tours we have a simple philosophy. Let the other car win. Nobody has ever left a review saying, "Our driver was just too cautious." Guests notice smoothness. They notice confidence. They notice professionalism. They don't notice arriving 30 seconds earlier. Another habit you'll develop is keeping the bus centered in its lane. Avoid unnecessary swerving. Small corrections tell your guests you're in complete control. Look well ahead, steer smoothly, and let the vehicle flow naturally down the road. Finally, eliminate distractions. California law prohibits holding a phone or other distracting object while driving. But this goes beyond the law. Every time your eyes leave the road, every time your attention shifts, you're giving away the one thing that keeps everyone safe. Your focus. Remember, a professional driver doesn't rely on quick reactions. A professional driver creates time before they need it. That's the cushion of safety. And it's one of the reasons our guests feel relaxed from the moment they step on board. One of the biggest compliments you'll never hear is this: "I forgot we were even driving." That's exactly what we're aiming for. At Toast Tours, great driving isn't about getting from one winery to the next. It's about making the journey part of the experience. Guests should feel relaxed, comfortable, confident, and that starts with smoothness. Every steering input, every touch of the accelerator, every shift, every press of the brakes, they should all be deliberate, gentle, and predictable. Here's a simple trick that professional drivers have used for decades. Imagine there's a full glass of water sitting on your dashboard. Your job is to arrive with every drop still in the glass. If the water splashes, your steering was too abrupt, your braking was too aggressive, or your acceleration was too quick. The smoother the water, the smoother the ride. That doesn't just make guests happier. It also reduces wear on our vehicles, protects expensive components, and creates a calmer environment for everyone on board. One place where smoothness matters most is braking. Good braking doesn't happen at the stop sign. It happens long before you get there. Instead of waiting until the last few seconds and braking hard, begin slowing early. Apply the brakes gently at first. Increase pressure smoothly as needed. Then gradually ease off as you come to a stop. The goal isn't simply to stop the vehicle. It's to make the stop almost unnoticeable. If your guests lean forward in their seats, you've probably started too late. If they barely notice you've stopped, you've done it right. You'll also notice that on most of our tours, we recommend avoiding cruise control. Cruise control works well on long, straight highways with light traffic. But that's not where we spend most of our day. We're driving winding vineyard roads, rolling hills, small towns, changing speed limits. Guests are looking out the windows. Wildlife, cyclists, farm equipment, and winery entrances can appear at any moment. Professional drivers stay engaged with the road. Maintaining your speed manually allows you to anticipate hills, corners, traffic, and changing conditions much more naturally than cruise control ever can. Remember, your guests won't remember how quickly you accelerated. They won't remember how perfectly you hit the speed limit. They'll remember how you made them feel. Relaxed, safe, comfortable. Because the best professional drivers don't just move people. They make the miles disappear. If you ask most commercial drivers where collisions happen, many will picture highways. But that's not where most preventable damage occurs. It happens in parking lots, driveways, winery entrances, loading areas, anywhere we're moving slowly. That's why low-speed maneuvering deserves just as much attention as highway driving. The first rule is simple: avoid backing whenever possible. R stands for risk. Most drivers spend less than 1% of their driving time in reverse. Yet roughly 1/4 of all vehicle collisions happen while backing. For commercial vehicles, that number can approach half of all on-the-job collisions. Every year, backing accidents cause hundreds of deaths and thousands of injuries. The safest backup is the one you never have to make. That's why we always try to park for an easy departure. Think ahead before you stop. Position the vehicle so you can simply pull forward when it's time to leave. And whenever possible, avoid backing with passengers on board. Passengers naturally become a distraction at exactly the moment you need your full attention. If backing is unavoidable, slow down. Use your four-way flashers. Take your time, and if something doesn't feel right, stop. One of the biggest hazards with a bus is something you can't see from the driver's seat. We call it the dragon's tail. Everything behind the rear axle swings in the opposite direction of your turn. That tail can easily strike trees, fences, parked vehicles, signs, mailboxes, or even people standing nearby. The tighter the turn, the farther the tail swings. Whenever possible, leave at least 4 feet of clearance between your vehicle and obstacles. A few extra feet today can prevent thousands of dollars in damage tomorrow. Another habit of professional drivers is checking overhead clearance. Parking structures, covered loading areas, low tree branches, winery entrances. If you're not absolutely certain the vehicle fits, don't guess, get out and check. That brings us to one of the most important habits in professional driving: goal. Get out and look. Walking around the vehicle takes less than a minute. Repairing damage takes much longer. You may also have people trying to help by waving you through a tight space. Be polite, but trust your own judgment. Most people have never driven a vehicle this size. They often don't understand tail swing, turning radius, or blind spots. You're the professional. The final decision is yours. Whenever you're performing an unusual maneuver, backing, loading guests, stopping in traffic, or maneuvering in a tight area, use your four-way flashers. They're one of the simplest ways to communicate your intentions to everyone around you. Railroad crossings deserve special attention as well. Stop between 15 and 50 feet before the tracks. Turn on your four-way flashers. Look carefully in both directions. Listen for trains. And remember, just because one train has passed doesn't mean another isn't coming on a different track. Another simple habit protects both the vehicle and its steering system. Avoid turning the steering wheel while the vehicle is standing still. Let the bus roll slightly before making sharp steering inputs. It reduces unnecessary strain on the steering components and tires. Every low-speed maneuver should finish with the next one in mind. Before you walk away from the vehicle, ask yourself one question. If my guests came back right now, could I leave safely without backing, repositioning, or squeezing through a tight space? If the answer is yes, you've parked well. Professional drivers don't rely on luck. They rely on planning. They think ahead, they leave themselves room, and they remember that low speed doesn't mean low risk. Because the safest maneuver is the one you planned before you ever put the vehicle in motion. Making a clean turn in a large vehicle isn't about turning the steering wheel sooner. It's about understanding where the vehicle pivots. Every vehicle pivots around its rear axle. A car is forgiving, but a longer vehicle like a bus can hit the curb or even worse. One of the most important skills you'll learn is using your mirrors. When making a turn, watch the rear tires in the mirror closest to the inside of the turn. Those tires tell you exactly where the bus is tracking. They're your best reference for making sure you don't scrape a curb, hit a planter, or clip anything along the side of the road. Your mirrors are your best friends. One of the biggest mistakes new commercial drivers make is beginning the turn too early. Instead of turning as soon as the front bumper reaches the corner, continue driving straight into the intersection. Keep the steering wheel straight. Watch your mirrors. Wait until the rear axle has completely passed the curb corner. Only then should you begin turning the steering wheel. By driving farther into the intersection before initiating the turn, the rear axle follows the roadway instead of cutting across the sidewalk or climbing the curb. This technique is known as squaring the corner, and it's the foundation of making clean, professional turns. Remember another simple rule: the dragon tail. If there's cyclist, a planter, a parked vehicle, or a sign beside the bus, your rear corner will swing out towards it when you leave the curb. That's why it's important to avoid sharp turns at low speeds. Everything behind the rear axle swings outward. When you turn right, the tail swings left. When you turn left, the tail swings right. That swing can strike trees, fences, parked vehicles, mailboxes, signs, and even pedestrians standing nearby. It can also create another hazard that's easy to overlook. As your tail swings outward, it may briefly occupy space outside your lane. On a two-lane road, your tail can swing into the oncoming traffic lane. On a multi-lane road, it can swing into a passing lane beside you. A vehicle that appears safely beside or behind you can suddenly be in the path of your tail swing. That's why it's so important to know what's around you before you begin the turn. If you aren't completely certain you have enough clearance, get out and look. Walk around the vehicle, find a reference point, determine exactly what needs to clear and how much space you have. 30 seconds of checking is always better than repairing damage. Professional drivers don't guess, they plan. They use their mirrors. They understand that the rear axle is the pivot point. They square the corner before turning. And they always know where both the rear tires and the dragon's tail are going. Because a clean turn isn't an accident. It's the result of understanding exactly how a large vehicle moves. When entering or leaving a driveway, every bus has 3 limitations: its wheelbase, its ground clearance, and its rear overhang. Those never change, so it's your job to change how you approach the grade. Before you drive into any steep entrance or exit, pause, look at it, read the driveway, ask yourself 3 questions. Where is the steepest transition? Which side is less aggressive? Where is my rear bumper going to be? You'll often find that one side of a driveway is much gentler than the other. The scrape marks left by other vehicles usually tell the story. They're warning you where other drivers got it wrong. Sometimes the safest path isn't the most obvious one. It may even mean entering or leaving from the opposite side of the driveway, when it's safe and legal to do so, to reduce the severity of the grade change. Always choose the path that gives your vehicle the greatest clearance. The second technique is approaching at an angle. Never attack a sharp grade change head-on if you have another option. Instead, approach at roughly a 45-degree angle. This allows one wheel to climb the grade before the other. Instead of the entire front axle rising at once, the vehicle twists gradually. That effectively shortens the distance between the axles as the suspension articulates, increasing your ground clearance. The same technique works when exiting. Let one wheel leave the driveway before the other whenever possible. This greatly reduces the chance of scraping the rear bumper, tailpipe, hitch, or the center of the chassis. Sometimes you can safely use the dirt or gravel shoulder beside the pavement to let one tire climb or descend before the other. That small change in angle can make the difference between clearing the driveway and hearing the sound every driver hates: metal scraping on pavement. Take it slowly. There is never a prize for getting through a difficult driveway quickly. Crawl over the transition. Moving slowly allows the suspension to work naturally instead of compressing suddenly under shifting weight. That preserves valuable ground clearance and gives you time to stop if something doesn't look right. If you're unsure, stop, get out, look. A 30-second walk around the vehicle is much cheaper than replacing a rear bumper. Longer steep grades also require proper speed control. Your service brakes should not be doing all the work. Use the engine and transmission as your primary braking system. Turn overdrive off if necessary, and use tow, haul. Select a lower gear before beginning the descent. If your vehicle is equipped with an engine brake, use it. Hot brakes are never a good thing. When you rely only on the surface brakes, they build heat very quickly. In fact, brake rotors can become extremely hot in as little as 10 seconds of continuous braking. That's why professional drivers don't ride the brakes. Instead, use firm, controlled brake applications for a few seconds. Then release the brakes completely and allow them to cool while the engine helps control your speed. Brake, release, coast, brake again if needed. This technique keeps your speed steady while giving the brakes time to cool between applications. It reduces brake fade, extends the life of your braking system, and keeps the vehicle under control on long descents. Remember, most scraping damage isn't caused by bad luck. It's caused by committing before planning. Professional drivers slow down, they read the driveway, they choose the gentlest path, they approach at an angle, they let one wheel climb at a time, they use the engine to control the vehicle instead of overheating the brakes. And if they aren't sure, they stop and look, because replacing a bumper is expensive. Taking an extra 30 seconds is free. Professional drivers don't spend their day reacting to problems. They prevent them. The difference isn't better reflexes or faster reactions. It's awareness. Situational awareness means constantly gathering information, predicting what might happen next, and making small adjustments before a situation becomes dangerous. The more information you collect, the fewer surprises you'll have. One of the easiest habits to develop is looking further ahead. Don't just watch the vehicle directly in front of you. Look 3, 4, even 5 vehicles ahead whenever possible. Brake lights several cars ahead often tell you what's coming long before the driver in front of you reacts. The earlier you recognize slowing traffic, the smoother and safer your driving becomes. Professional drivers are always reading other road users. When you approach parked vehicles, don't just glance at them. Look closely. Is someone sitting inside? If they are, there's a good chance they're about to pull away from the curb. Don't stop there. Look at the steering wheels. A steering wheel beginning to turn is often the first clue that a vehicle is about to move. Watch brake lights. Watch reverse lights. Watch turn signals. These are all pieces of information that tell you what another driver is planning to do. The best drivers don't wait until a vehicle moves. They already expected it. People deserve the same attention. If you depend on another driver or pedestrian to stay where they are, make eye contact. Only when you have eye contact can you reasonably expect another person to act predictably and avoid creating a dangerous situation. If you don't have eye contact, never assume they have seen you. Your horn and your lights are communication tools. Use them early and appropriately to let others know you're there. Always pay attention to the road itself. Road conditions change throughout the year. A driveway that's perfectly safe during the summer may become muddy after the first rain. A vineyard road that was firm yesterday may be too soft to support a heavy vehicle today. A dry creek crossing can suddenly have water flowing across it during the rainy season. Even hills you've climbed many times before may become too slippery or too steep once conditions change. Never assume yesterday's conditions are today's conditions. Read the road every time. Listen to your vehicle as carefully as you watch the road. Keep an eye, and an ear, out throughout your trip for anything out of the ordinary. New vibrations, unusual noises, air leaks, scraping sounds, warning buzzers, a burning smell, a warning light. Small changes are often your vehicle's first indication that something needs attention. The sooner you notice a problem, the easier it usually is to prevent a breakdown or more serious damage. One situation deserves special attention: wildlife. Animals can appear without warning, especially on rural roads around Paso Robles. Your instinct may be to swerve. Don't. Never swerve to avoid an animal. Controlled braking while staying in your lane saves far more lives than losing control of the vehicle. Even with large animals, it's usually safer to brake firmly in a straight line than to risk a rollover, entering oncoming traffic, leaving the roadway, or striking something more dangerous than the animal itself. Above all, stay calm. Professional drivers don't panic. They make controlled decisions. Situational awareness isn't about being suspicious. It's about staying curious. Constantly ask yourself, what might happen next? Which vehicle could move? Where's my escape route? What has changed? The more often you ask those questions, the less often you'll be surprised. Remember, new drivers look for hazards. Professional drivers look for clues. By the time a hazard appears, it's often too late. The safest drivers see it before it happens. A professional driver doesn't just transport guests safely. A professional driver protects the vehicle, supports the team, and leaves everything ready for the next tour. Professional responsibility begins before you ever turn the key, although making sure the vehicle starts before you put time in it is a high priority. Every tour starts with a thorough pre-trip inspection. Never assume that because the vehicle was fine yesterday, it's fine today. Walk around the vehicle, check the tires, lights, mirrors, fluids, safety equipment, and look underneath for anything unusual. If you find any deficiencies, document them immediately. Every defect must be noted on your driver vehicle inspection report, or DVIR, and on your end-of-day form. Reporting small issues early allows us to repair them before they become expensive repairs or safety concerns. Once you're on the road, your responsibility continues. Don't stop inspecting just because the tour has started. Keep an eye, and an ear, out throughout the day for anything out of the ordinary. Watch your gauges. Listen for unusual noises. Notice new vibrations, warning lights, air leaks, or unusual smells. Small changes are often the first indication that something isn't right. The earlier you catch a problem, the easier it is to fix. Never stop for fuel with guests on board the vehicle. If it looks like you'll need fuel during the day, try to fuel while your guests are enjoying one of their winery visits. If you'll be leaving the group briefly, let the office know first. If the fuel card doesn't work and you need to use your own money, upload the receipt so you can be reimbursed. Professional drivers also manage their time. Always keep an eye on the clock. Hours of service regulations are there to prevent fatigue and keep everyone safe. Within a 100 air-mile radius of our warehouse, federal regulations allow us to operate without an electronic logging device. Under that exemption, you may work up to 12 consecutive hours, provided you've had at least 10 consecutive hours off duty before starting your shift. If your vehicle is equipped with an ELD, or if your trip extends beyond the 100 air-mile radius, different limits apply. In those situations, never exceed 10 hours of driving or 15 hours on duty within a 24-hour period. If you think there's any chance you'll exceed your hours of service, notify the manager on duty immediately. Don't wait until it's too late. Give us enough time to solve the problem. We would much rather send another driver than ask someone to violate the regulations. At Toast Tours, we will never knowingly put you in a position where you're expected to exceed your legal driving hours. If finishing your tour would require an hours of service violation, tell us as early as possible so we can make other arrangements. At the wineries, be mindful of unnecessary idling. California limits commercial passenger vehicles to 5 minutes of idling unless passengers are on board or are expected to board within the next 10 minutes. Start the vehicle about 10 minutes before departure so the cabin is comfortable when your guests return. If you're concerned about the wine your guests purchased, it should be safely stored in the coolers in the rear of the vehicle to prevent spoilage. At the end of every tour, your responsibility isn't finished until the vehicle is ready for the next driver. Complete a thorough post-trip inspection. Look for new damage, remove trash, check for forgotten belongings, verify the vehicle is clean, fueled if required, and ready for service. Complete your end-of-day form and report any issues you discovered during the day. If a major problem makes the vehicle unsafe to operate or renders it out of service, don't wait until tomorrow. Immediately notify the manager on duty. Never assume someone else will report it. Every driver depends on the previous driver to communicate honestly and completely. Remember, guests may only ride with us for one day, but our vehicles serve thousands of guests over their lifetime. Every inspection, every maintenance report, every phone call, every note on the EOD form helps keep the next tour safe. Professional responsibility isn't something you do before or after driving. It's part of every mile you drive. At Toast Tours, we don't just provide transportation. We provide an experience. That experience begins long before the first winery and continues until the very last guest steps back into their hotel. It starts with the first pickup of the day. Whenever possible, plan to arrive at least 10 minutes early at your first pickup location. Being early means you're relaxed. It gives you time to prepare the vehicle, review the day's itinerary, and greet your guests without feeling rushed. It also sends an important message. Their day is important to us. Professional guides are ready before their guests are. When your guests arrive, greet them with a smile. The first few minutes often determine how the rest of the day feels. A calm, confident welcome immediately builds trust. Throughout the day, provide true door-to-door service whenever it's safe to do so. When arriving at a winery, pull up as close to the entrance as possible while remaining safe and considerate of other traffic. Turn on your four-way flashers so other drivers know you're making a passenger stop. Your goal is to give your guests the shortest, easiest walk to the front door. Escort your guests inside and make sure they're checked in before moving the vehicle. Once your guests are taken care of, relocate the vehicle and park for departure. Professional drivers don't simply look for the closest parking space. They think ahead. Before turning off the engine, ask yourself, when my guests return, can I leave smoothly without backing up or repositioning? If more vehicles arrive, could I become blocked in? Can I back into this parking space now, instead of backing out later into an unknown hazard? Will my idling bother nearby guests, or can I cool the vehicle just before departure? Am I leaving the closest parking spaces available for winery guests? Whenever possible, park so you can simply pull forward when it's time to leave. Avoid backing or unnecessary repositioning. A few extra seconds spent choosing the right parking spot can save several minutes later and create a much smoother experience for your guests. As your pickup time approaches, return to the entrance before your guests are ready. Again, pull up as close to the door as safely possible. Turn on your four-way flashers. Be waiting for your guests, not the other way around. Walk into the winery and carry and color code wine purchases, help guests board if needed, do a head count and confirm everyone is back on the vehicle, and depart smoothly. Your guests should never wonder where the bus is. They should feel like it was waiting for them all along. Every arrival should feel effortless. Every departure should feel organized. Most guests will never notice the planning behind the scenes. They'll simply remember that everything flowed naturally. That's exactly what we're aiming for. At Toast Tours, hospitality isn't just what happens inside the vehicle. It begins the moment our guests see us arrive, and it continues until we've safely delivered them home. Because great drivers move people. Great guides make people feel cared for. At Toast Tours, remember that our guests aren't just expecting you to offer a service and do your job. They're trusting us with birthdays, anniversaries, family reunions, bucket list vacations. For many of them, this is a day they've been looking forward to for months, or even years. You have the opportunity to make that day unforgettable. Be safe, be genuine, be curious, be present, tell stories that bring this area to life. Treat every guest with kindness, every winery with respect, and every teammate like family. Never stop learning, never stop improving, never stop looking for the small details that guests will remember long after they've forgotten which wineries they visited. At Toast Tours, we don't expect you to simply meet expectations. We expect you to exceed them, not because it's a rule, but because that's who we are. Every smile, every conversation, every story, every safe mile, every thoughtful gesture, it all adds up to something much bigger than a tour. It becomes a memory, one that our guests will share with their friends, their families, and hopefully one day with us again. So every morning, before you turn the key, remember why we're here. Drive safely, serve generously, tell great stories, create unforgettable memories. Let's go change someone's day the Toast Tours way.